to the Meccans. A 25-day siege began. Eventually, the Qurayza asked Muhammad to be allowed to surrender on the same terms as Anadir. Instead, Muhammad appointed a judge, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, to decide the fate of the Jews. The judge decided, "I condemn the men to death, their property to be divided by the victors, their women and children to be slaves." The sentence was carried out on the following day, as the Muslims slaughtered 900 men. The women and children were sold into slavery, and the Jews' land and possessions were divided amongst the Muslims. The Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. In 628, Muhammad and 1,400 Muslims traveled toward Mecca, making camp at nearby Al-Hudaybiyah. Hostilities were avoided when Muhammad and the Meccans agreed on a treaty called the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, in which the two sides agreed to suspend hostilities against one another for 10 years. The Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah was favorable to Muhammad's long-term strategy to incorporate Mecca into Islam at some future date. In the meantime, Mecca would regard Muhammad as disposed to friendliness and non-aggression. The Siege of Khaybar. 6 weeks later, Muhammad led the Muslims on a raid of Khaybar, the rich Jewish oasis to the northeast. After fierce fighting, 93 people were killed, and the Jews negotiated a surrender with Muhammad. In the surrender agreement, a new principle was introduced. The Jews would continue to cultivate the land, but would give up half of their harvest as payment of tribute to the Muslims. Also, Muhammad reserved the right to break the agreement and expel them if he chose. All the Jewish and Christian tribes in Arabia submitted to the Muslims under similar terms. The Jews and Christians, the dhimmi, were to pay a tribute tax known as jizya. The Pact of Khaybar agreement fixed the relationship between Muslim victors and vanquished Christian and Jewish populations when Islamic conquerors expanded beyond Arabia. The conquest of Mecca. The Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah did not last long. With his power now increased over a wide area and Mecca neutralized by the treaty, Muhammad was soon in a position to move against Mecca. In January 630, the Prophet and 10,000 Muslim warriors advanced on Mecca. The Muslim forces divided into 4 columns and stormed the city from 4 directions. The Quraysh offered little resistance, and Mecca was easily conquered. Muhammad ordered all the idols at the Kaaba destroyed, rededicated it as a holy Muslim shrine, and proclaimed Mecca as the holy city of Islam. Non-believers were forbidden entry to Mecca upon penalty of death. By 631, with the Quran and sword in hand, Muslim warriors had subjugated all the nomadic desert tribes of Arabia, and the Arabian Peninsula was ruled by Muhammad and Islam. Idolatry had been eliminated from the Arabian Peninsula, and the dhimmi, Jews and Christians, were paying tribute to the Muslims. The Islamic conquests, jihad, and dominance over non-believers. The death of the Prophet. In the year 632, at the age of 59, Muhammad's health deteriorated and he died. Muslims across Arabia were shocked at the Prophet's passing. Without his presence, it was feared the Ummah would fall apart and Islam would disappear. Who could rule in the place of the great Muhammad? This question elicited both a political and spiritual crisis that would plague Islam for centuries to come. Muhammad left no successor, nor even a system for choosing one upon his death. No individual in the Ummah had Muhammad's stature, and of course no one claimed prophethood. After much argument, Muslim tribal leaders chose Abu Bakr as their leader, appointing him to the office of caliph, or deputy of the Muslims. Abu Bakr tried to placate the believers, pronouncing that though Muhammad was gone, his holy messages would endure, and Allah's rule still existed, and that Islam was greater than the life of any man. However, with Muhammad gone, many desert tribes sought to sever their ties with Mecca. The breakaway movement became known as the apostasy, Rida. Abu Bakr ordered the fabled warrior Khalid ibn al-Walid to quash the revolt. After unifying the peninsula, Khalid marched his Bedouin warriors beyond Arabia, into Syria and Persia, setting the stage for the Islamic conquests that would soon follow. Islam explodes out of Arabia. In 634, Abu Bakr named Umar ibn al-Khattab as his successor shortly before he died. Umar referred to himself as Commander of the Faithful, used by many future leaders. A period of bold expansion and conquest began as most of Byzantine and Persia, vast territories stretching from the Middle East to northern Africa, fell under Muslim rule. Each success reinforced their divine mission and that Allah was on their side. As Umar carried the jihad far beyond Arabia, Jews and Christians could buy the right to life and freedom of worship if they agreed to pay tribute and accept Islamic rule. Khalid ibn al-Walid's statement in Damascus in 635 became standard terms of surrender for Jews and Christians. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, he promises to give them security for their lives, property, and churches. We give to them the pact of Allah and the protection of his prophet, the caliphs and the believers. So long as they pay the tax, nothing but good shall befall them. Islam conquers North Africa, Spain, India, and China. The Islamic conquests spread over land and sea. Guided by spirited and fearless leaders, the Muslims overcame the remaining Persian armies, seizing Babylonia, Mesopotamia, Armenia, and Persia. In the west, they conquered the Christian provinces of the eastern Mediterranean, from Syria and Palestine to Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. In 711, Muslims crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, advancing into the Iberian Peninsula to establish a foothold in Europe. A few years later, they controlled all of Spain and Portugal. The Muslims then headed for Europe's heartland. They were halted in the Pyrenees by Frankish leader Charles Martel at Narbonne in 720, and in 732 at the Battle of Tours at Poitiers. By 751, Islam had expanded all the way to the Indus River Valley in India and central China. A little over 1 century after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, Muslim rule covered more of the earth than did the Roman Empire at its peak. The dhimmi, the tributaries. Under Islamic rule, Jews and Christians were permitted full administrative and judicial control over their communities through their religious authorities, the bishop or rabbi. Jews and Christians were allowed to keep their original faith and live under Islamic supremacy within the Ummah in a tolerated, protected status and pay a tribute tax. Islam regards Jews and Christians as religio-political communities, as Islam sees itself, but inferior. The status of Jews and Christians under Islam is one of natural inequality based on divine beliefs, because Jews and Christians fail to recognize Muhammad as the final messenger of God, thereby accepting Islam. Islamic rule recognizing a place, albeit an inferior one, for other revealed religions represented a considerable advance for the era. The very idea of coexistence, even in a state of inequality, and the granting of self-administration, though oppressive by modern standards, was tolerant by medieval standards. According to a hadith, the Prophet once said, Allah would torment those who torment people in the world. Beware of the supplication of the oppressed, for there is no barrier between him and Allah. Whoever will kill a tributary will not smell the fragrance of paradise. The Covenant of Umar. As Islam expanded through Africa and Asia, it subjugated and absorbed millions of people. As Islam was the true path, Muslim conquerors saw themselves as the rightful heirs of Jewish and Christian civilization, monuments, culture, and history. Mosques were built on the holiest of Jewish temples and Christian churches. Many cities lost their original names. Amid, Armenia, was renamed Diyarbakir. Constantinople became Istanbul. Jerusalem was renamed Al-Quds, and Hebron became Al-Khalil. Though many hadiths cited the Prophet's admonitions against mistreatment of protected peoples, the dhimmi status evolved to one of oppression and humiliation. as a new body of rules emerged, known as the Covenant of Umar, all to demonstrate the absolute supremacy of Islam. The new dhimmi system would be practiced over an expanse of continents for over 1,000 years. The implementation and harshness or level of tolerance for dhimmi under Islam varied depending on time and place and the ruler. Discriminatory taxes. Kharaj was a tax on cultivating land for farming. Jizya, a poll tax often paid at a humiliating public ceremony in which the dhimmi was struck on the head. In some areas, a receipt for the jizya was worn around the neck as a mark of dishonor. Places of worship. The construction of new synagogues and churches was forbidden. Liturgy. The ringing of church bells, the sounding of the ram's horn, shofar, in public was prohibited. Burial. Dhimmi cemeteries, considered as being within the realm of hell, were not respected. Law. Dhimmi testimony in court was not considered valid based on hadiths, which maintained that non-believers were of perverse and diabolic nature because they persisted in denying the superiority of Islam. Public administration. Dhimmi were excluded from public office, so a non-believer should never exercise authority over Muslims. Living quarters. Dhimmi houses had to be smaller than Muslims. Slaves. Dhimmi were not permitted to own slaves who converted to Islam. Matrimony. Marriage or sexual relations between dhimmi and Muslim women was punishable by death. However, a Muslim man could marry a dhimmi woman. Degrading tasks. Jews and Christians were commonly assigned to public works projects, such as the digging of cisterns, the construction of bridges, roads, and train tracks. Riding animals. Riding a noble animal, such as a horse or camel, by dhimmi was regarded as a grave offense. Outside of towns, dhimmi were allowed to ride on donkeys. A dhimmi would typically have to dismount and pass a Muslim on foot to show respect. The Islamic Empire. Golden Ages and Crusader clashes. Islamic outlook on the world. By military conquest, Islam had spread throughout the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and Asia. The Golden Age of Islam found many races and cultures unified under Islam, while the Arabic language and culture now dominated the civilized world. Muslims of every age traveled by foot, beast, or sea, crossing huge expanses of parched desert to complete the sacred journey to Mecca, even if it took years. The intermingling of peoples from vast societies, with its Islamic emphasis on equality and brotherhood, helped build a feeling of common purpose and Islamic community throughout the empire. This resulted in an exciting exchange of ideas. The Islamic Empire became the most advanced civilization in the world, and it reinforced the belief in the divinity of the Ummah and the superiority of Islam. Muslims enjoyed a standard of living that surpassed the rudimentary village life of Christian Europe. Saqid ibn Ahmad, the Qadi, or judge of the Muslim city of Toledo, wrote a book in 1068 describing the center and highest level of civilization in the world as the territory of Islam. The northern Christian societies represented an arrested stage of development, and to the far north and south were white and black barbarians. Muslim advances.
اما ملت بزرگ ما که قرنها از پیشتازان علم و تمدن و فرهنگ در جهان بوده است سوخت هسته‌ای قرار می‌گیرد.
The experimentation by Arabs with powders,